hardtack, salted pork, and acorn coffee. Now that's what I think of when I think of a meal a soldier might eat during the American Civil War. But what if I told you that bread pudding might also be on the menu? But there's a catch. You're gonna have to get shot first. Maybe a mild case of dysentery would work, because bread pudding is hospital food. So today, in partnership with the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, I'm going to take a look at the book that suggests bread pudding to be the perfect convalescent treat. And I'll show you how to make it at home, even if you don't have a musket ball lodged in your thigh. This time on Tasting History. Today's recipe comes from the Hospital Steward's Manual, written by Dr. Joseph J. Woodward in 1862. Boil 1 pint of milk with a piece of cinnamon and lemon peel. Pour it on 2 ounces of breadcrumbs, then add 2 eggs, half an ounce of currants, and a little sugar. Steam it in a buttered mold or pan for 1 hour. Well, that sounds easy. I mean, so many more specifics than those medieval or ancient recipes, so thank you, Dr. Woodward, for making this week a little easier on me. So for this recipe, you will need 1 pint or 475 milliliters of whole milk, 1 cinnamon stick, a bit of lemon peel, 2 ounces or 60 grams of whole wheat breadcrumbs, that's about a half cup plus 1 tablespoon, 2 eggs, a half ounce or 14 grams of currants, so about an eighth of a cup of currants, and if you can't find currants, go ahead and use raisins, and 2 tablespoons of sugar. Now they used brown sugar and white sugar at the time, so, it's up to you. I'm using white sugar, but either one is fine. And then you'll need something to steam it in, so you'll need a big stock pot with some water and a small pudding basin or mold, ceramic or metal, works fine. Now, if you're like me and you haven't had a lot of luck in the past tying handles onto pudding basins, then you can go online, I'll put a link in the description, and get one of these, which I got. They come with a lid and a handle, and they just take some of the pain out of making steamed puddings. Now you have 2 options when it comes to hot water. The best is to boil water separately, like in a kettle, and then you'll pour it into the pot once your pudding is in there, but you can also just boil water in the pot as well. Also, if you have a ramekin available, put it upside down in the bottom of the pot. Then you can set the pudding straight onto that instead of on the metal bottom of the pot, and it helps it to cook a little bit more evenly. Not a big deal if you don't have it, but if you do, give it a shot. So now for the pudding. Pour your milk into a small saucepan, add your cinnamon stick and the lemon peel, and then set it over medium heat until it starts to boil. Keep an eye on it because you don't want it to scorch, so once you see those bubbles coming up, take it off the heat and pour it over your breadcrumbs, leaving the cinnamon stick and the lemon out. They've done their job. Then add your eggs and whisk everything together until it's nice and smooth. Then toss in your currants and your sugar and whisk again. Then butter your mold or your pudding basin and pour the pudding inside. Now, if you have a mold like I do with the top, now's the time to put it on. If you don't, then you're going to have to create a watertight seal using parchment, aluminum foil, and string. I am terrible at it, so I'm actually going to link to a BBC video where they show you step-by-step how to do it. It's fantastic, and I mean, making steamed puddings is what the British do, so just go straight to the source. It's going to be better, I promise. Then set the pudding into the pot and pour about 2 inches of boiling water around it. Then put the lid on and let it steam for 1 hour. Now the best thing is if you have a clear lid so you can see if the water has boiled away, because you don't want it to boil away. So you'll have to add a little bit more boiling water if that happens. If you don't have a see-through lid, like I don't, then maybe every 20 minutes or so just pick it up a little bit and see if it's starting to boil away and add some, but try not to let out too much steam because you need that in there. Now while our Civil War bread pudding steams, make sure to hit that like button and let us take a look at this Hospital Steward's Manual that we've all been hearing so much about. Perhaps no subject is more worthy of attention in a hospital than the quality of the food and the character of the cooking. In the latter, there is certainly greater room for improvement in the United States Army hospitals than in the former. That was Union Dr. Joseph Woodward lamenting the fact that his hospital stewards didn't know anything about cooking, or medicine for that matter. And it might not be a surprise because here are the job qualifications the good doctor laid out. 18 to 35 years old, able-bodied, free of disease, honest and upright, of good intelligence, having a knowledge of English, able to spell and write correctly, and industrious, patient, and good-tempered. Note that there was no mention of medical or culinary background in that. See now, in the Civil War, hospital stewards had a lot of responsibilities. Besides the obvious keeping track of supplies, they also maintained surgical equipment, mixed and administered drugs like arsenic and mercury pills, something you'd probably want someone with a little experience to do. Sometimes they assisted in surgery, and of course, they managed the kitchens. This job had a really wide scope of responsibilities. But with those responsibilities came perks. They were the highest paid commissioned officers in the Union Army, they got their own rooms, lots of firewood, and best of all, they rarely were in places where they would get shot at. So of course the job was popular, and it didn't really seem to matter if you knew how to do it or not. See, it wasn't like it is today when only the most deserving and well-qualified candidates will get a job. Back then, you could have gotten the job just because your dad was rich or your uncle was General McClellan. Can you imagine such a crazy time? So saddled with a bunch of people who didn't know how to do their job, Dr. Woodward wrote the Hospital Steward's Manual, a down-and-dirty guide to whip those boys into shape. And one of the most important sections was the section on food, because Dr. Woodward was sick of eating boiled meat that was left, in his words, tasteless and insipid. Everyone's a critic. In the book, he talks about things that I would like to think that we take for granted in a hospital kitchen today. On no account should patients be allowed to come in person to the kitchen for their rations, nor should they be allowed to visit in the kitchen. Cleanliness is indispensable in the kitchen. The floors should be kept dry and well cleaned. There's a really cool section where he's talking about cooking out in the field, rather than like a brick-and-mortar hospital. And while he says that a good camp stove is the best way to cook, he also realizes that they're probably not always going to be available, and so he gives instructions on how to make a pit with a spit over it. What's interesting is that when he admits that cooking over an open fire can be difficult when the wind changes, he turns to Florence Nightingale for advice. During the Crimean War, Florence Nightingale noticed these Turkish soldiers creating these fire pits in such a way that when the wind changed, it didn't mess with the flame at all. Pretty cool. But what I think is so neat is that the English founder of nursing was having an effect on medical practices in American field hospitals. I love when historical characters kind of pop up like that, where they're not necessarily supposed to be. It's like finding an Easter egg in a Marvel movie or a crossover in your favorite show. I am such a dork. Woodward goes on to lay out the 3 meals of the day: breakfast, dinner, and supper. Now that's what my grandparents used to call it. Dinner for lunch and supper for dinner, which I never really got, but now maybe I see where they got it. They were reading the Hospital Steward's Manual. And each meal had 3 different menus depending on how sick the patient was. So you had the full diet, the half diet, and the low diet. And just to show you that nobody was living high on the hog, here's an example of the full diet. Breakfast: a pint of coffee with milk and sugar, a slice of bread and an ounce of butter, and some relish of cold meat, bacon, or meat stew with onion or potato. Dinner: a pint and a half of thin soup, or once or twice a week, a well-made stew of meat and vegetables such as onions and potatoes may be served instead of soup. Supper: a cup of tea and buttered bread on most days. Occasionally, mush and milk could be substituted for bread and butter. Hot dog, it's mush and milk day! Lucky me! Oddly enough, it was the patients on the low diet who sometimes qualified for something called extra diet, and that could be anything from eggs or chicken, fresh fruit, malt liquor, or bread pudding. But now the coolest thing about the whole book are the recipes, because so many of them are for huge quantities of food. Bean soup for 100 men. 8 quarts of beans, 20 pounds of pork, half a dozen onions, salt 1/2 pound, pepper 1 ounce, water 120 pints, 15 gallons. It does strike me that 1 ounce of pepper is not really enough for that quantity of food, but whatever. Then there's some really weird recipes, like beef tea with calf's foot jelly or isinglass. Beef tea. No. And my favorite is for a refreshing drink for invalids called toast and water. What could toast and water be? That sounds interesting. It's not. It's a piece of toast crammed into a jug with boiling water and left, and then strained out. Toast and water. Though Dr. Woodward does recommend not leaving it in the water for too long during the summer months because it could ferment and become alcoholic. And frankly, that sounds better than soggy toast. But for my money, the best recipes come from the extra diet section of the book. You've got something called Sawyer's Cheap Crimean Lemonade. It's probably cheap because it doesn't actually have any lemons. It has a little bit of lime juice, but not even all that much. But he does suggest putting some rum in it as an agreeable addition, and I would be inclined to agree. It's probably something Stonewall Jackson might have enjoyed if he couldn't get his hands on an actual lemon. See, I guess he was rather partial to the fruit. One of his officers after the war wrote, "A small piece was bitten out of it, and slowly and unsparingly he began to extract its flavor and its juice. From that moment until darkness ended the battle, that lemon scarcely left his lips except to be used as a baton to emphasize an order." I can picture that. It's kind of interesting. And he must have liked sour things because he also named his horse Little Sorrel. Anyway, I don't like sour things, so that's why I'm so glad that our bread pudding sweetened with sugar should be about ready. So after an hour, remove the lid of the pot and carefully take the pudding out of the water. You might want to let it cool just a bit before turning it out onto a plate. I did not let mine cool enough, and so the top kind of swanky. So here we are, Civil War bread pudding. The texture is looks really nice. Very custardy almost. Let's see. Let's take a taste. Okay. If this is hospital food, then we are going backwards because this is quite good, and I've had hospital food and it's not quite good. Really nice. I do wish a little more sugar in there, but even so, it's sweet. It's very eggy, very custardy. The texture is really smooth. More like a boiled pudding than a modern day bread pudding. The currants add that little bit of zing to it as well. It kind of cuts through the custardness of the egg. This is lovely. It's so moist. And in that second bite, I got some of the cinnamon. It's really subtle. I wish it was a little bit more actually, but really subtle, but it's there. Really lovely. You know, if you had to go to the hospital, sucks, but at least you might get some bread pudding out of it if you're on that low diet. So thank you to Kyle Dalton and the National Museum of Civil War Medicine who really helped me with the research on this episode. I'm going to put a link to their website below where you can go browse if you're interested, or you can become a member or otherwise support the museum. So thank you again for joining me, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.